So the other day I did that thing where I was working on a project and I was confident I had enough yarn to finish it off. But it turns out my confidence was misplaced because I definitely did not. And because I did not, I had to nick into Spotlight just to grab literally one more skein. And while I was there, I came across this. The Red Heart Granny Square yarn. Now, probably about a year ago at this point, I am late to a trend, as is my usual MO, but about a year ago I was seeing this yarn everywhere, and while I was curious about it, I wasn't so curious that I was willing to spend like $40 a skein just to find out what it was like, because the only place that I could find this yarn here in Australia at the time was like specific websites that sell imported American yarn. And yeah, I wasn't forking over that much money just for one single skein. But at my trip to Spotlight the other day, I discovered they had it, and that was the first time I've ever seen it in a Spotlight store. And I thought, you know what, I've got a couple of projects in the works for which I need granny squares, so why not grab a couple and just test out what they like? What is the worst that could happen? I probably shouldn't jinx myself by asking that question, should I? But that is what we're going to do here today. I just want to see what these are like for myself. Let's start with the yarn label. What information does this have for us? So Red Heart Granny Squares. Okay, here we go. All right, now here it says we need a 5.5 millimeter hook, but it also says that that is a suggested hook size. I would think, given how I'm assuming this works, you just keep crocheting in the round to get yourself a granny square, I would assume that you'd need a specific hook size, because if you use the wrong hook size, then that would not work. So I don't really like how it says suggested hook size, but again, that is an assumption of mine and may not be the case. But yeah, I don't know if it should say suggested hook size. We'll circle back to that later. Step-by-step instructions on the back. That's good. Apparently it's a Women's Choice Award winner, whatever that means. Here we go. One skein should equal 14 squares. So if I get 13 squares, if I get 15 squares, this label has lied to us. Points deducted for that. Because the instructions are on the back of the label, let's open this up. I'm just really curious how this works. Like, do we start with a magic circle? Do we start with a slip knot? Do I need to leave a certain length of yarn to begin with? Like, just all those little details. So here we've got care instructions. They're not important to me just yet, but I will read them later. I don't really want to crochet a vest. I just want the squares. Right, so we want these instructions here. With color 1, chain 4, join with slip stitch to first chain to form ring. Now it said earlier on in the instructions that we need to leave a 10 centimeter yarn tail, and we also need to start from the center pull. One thing I will say, no matter what else happens in this video, I love the fact that this yarn starts off with a little yarn tail for a center pull. I love that. I wish Spotlight, if you are listening, pay attention. Do this with all your yarns, please. It would be so helpful. So Spotlight, more center pull tails, please. I'm just grabbing my ruler. So we want to start with a 10 centimeter tail. So we want to make our slip knot. And then we need to chain 4 and slip stitch in the first chain. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I have grabbed out my 5.5 millimeter hook. That is what I'm using because that's what it tells me to use. And we're going to slip stitch. And see, like, I always begin my granny squares with a magic circle, so this feels very strange to me. Where are we up to? First round, chain 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then 3 double crochet. And I think you do that 3 times, so then I think we chain 3 and finish with 2 double crochet. because the first part of our chain 6 I think counts as the okay. We have some blue showing. You showed up early, sir. We're not ready for you yet. So yeah, if I did another one. Okay, well, round 1 was a bust. That's not what we want. I'm thinking I left too long of a tail at the start, but it did say, where is it? Motif start with color 1, shortest color, repetition from center pull of skein, leaving a 4-inch or 10-centimeter tail to weave in. And I did that. So that's a bit of a letdown. Round 1 and it's already buggering up. I'll scrap that. And I think I'll make the yarn tail a couple of centimeters shorter. So let's try 8 centimeters this time. That is better. So I needed to leave at the start an 8-centimeter yarn tail, not a 10-centimeter yarn tail as the instructions specified. So that is annoying. Yarn, you get a check in the negative column for that. I mean, 2 centimeters in this context is quite a big difference. At least I was able to figure out I needed to adjust that length, but I shouldn't have had to do that. But now we will continue on to round number 2. Once more, I'm restraining myself from continuing how I normally would, and we're going to read the instructions. So second round, slip stitch in the chain 3 space. Isn't that the chain 6 space? Or is it just saying it counts as the chain 3? Whatever. I'm just going to slip stitch in there. So slip stitch. Then we're going to chain 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Then we 3 double crochet in the same chain 3 space. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1, then 3 double crochet, chain 3, 3 double crochet in the next chain 3 space. I was supposed to be chaining 1, I think, between those. I forgot to do that. So I'm going to undo this one. So I chained 1 there, I didn't chain 1 here. So chain 1 and then repeat. See, and that's what I mean about me automatically going about my granny squares as I normally would. I wouldn't put a chain between my granny clusters there, but the instructions call for that, so that's what I'm going to do in this situation. That is slightly off. Just that tiniest little bit, but it is still off. That could have been, I think there are a couple of points throughout this round here where I loosened my tension a little bit. So that could be the issue. I'm not sure where that was. I think it was around here. You know what, I'll repeat that. I'll undo my work because it's not much. I'll undo my work and I'll just tighten up that tension a little bit, which I wouldn't think I would have to do because my tension tends to be fairly tight anyway. So I now have the opposite problem where my tension is too tight. So I've got this much of the darker blue yarn left. See, that was one of my concerns going into this, is that this would just be so finicky. To me, it just seems so much easier to get 1, 2, 3, however many colors you want, and just crochet granny squares from that, because you don't have to worry about getting a specific color in a specific spot. Do I undo it and recrochet this for a third time? I think in the the interests of giving these skeins a fair go, I will do that. I stopped from here last time. All right, so now I need to get my tension in between what it was originally and what I just did. I need to hit that Goldilocks spot in the middle there. The lighter blue came in slightly too early, but I'm leaving it there. I'm not recrocheting this for a third time. That's close enough as far as I'm concerned. Now we need to do round number 3. I'm assuming we just repeat the granny stitch clusters around as we normally would, but I am going to be reading through the instructions anyway, just because I don't want to miss a step, just in case they sneak anything in there that's a little bit different. So third round, slip stitch into the chain 3 space. And then chain 1 again, and we're just going to repeat all the way around. I've just got to remember to do those chain 1s after my clusters, because I don't normally do that. And forgetting a detail like that is something that would sort of throw my colours off. And I don't think they need any additional help with that. They're fine. They're fine on their own. I mean, look at that. I still have to do a chain 1 and then 2 double crochet there. Look how early this color has come in. My tension hasn't changed that much, so it should be more consistent than that. I need a sip of tea to calm down. I guess I have to frog this again, but where do I frog to? Do I just have to frog the whole bloody round? This wouldn't be an issue if we were just using separate skeins. It wouldn't matter if my tension was the tiniest, littlest bit off. Let's go again. I can tighten up that tension a bit, but I don't want to do too much like I did last time and then end up with this darker blue left over. And that was certainly better, but I don't like the fact that if your tension changes even slightly, it's just going to throw off the round. Like, there's nothing you can do about that. If you don't notice that your tension has shifted, bad luck basically. You won't figure that out until you get to the very end of the round. I find that to be quite annoying, but we're going to continue. I think I've got 2 more rounds of this to go because there's 5 colors. I believe white is after this. 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And again, we're just sort of repeating what we've done. And 2. So I'm going to try and keep my tension the same as it was, but I honestly didn't think that I had changed it in the first place. Will we get this color in the right spot? Place your bets now. And then chain 1. I've got 2 double crochet, which I don't know if we're gonna make. We're not gonna make that. This is so frustrating because you need to get it in just the right spot, and then the last, yeah, that's gonna be totally white. And what makes it worse is I don't know how much I need to frog to fix this problem. So I could frog this far and it could be fine, but maybe the problem is this section here, or perhaps it's this section here, or perhaps it's more than one spot. So it's very irritating that if the colors don't align correctly, you really have to frog all of your round. Unless you can detect which area or areas are the problem, you need to undo all of it. And I find that a little bit annoying. You know what? I'm gonna go here. I'm just gonna frog this much. I'm going to tighten that tension now and just see if that makes a difference. And that in itself could be an issue because you're going to have like looser tension on one side and then tighter tension on the other. So that ended up the same as the previous color change. We got the final pull through of the double crochet in a different color. I'm leaving it. I'm leaving it. That's close enough. I don't want to have to frog this again. It's just so finicky. You have to get it in exactly right, the right spot. You have to have your tension exactly right. That's what it seems like so far. It's more of a pain in the ass than it's worth, really. But we've only got one round to go, so we'll try and finish off strong here. Oh, come on. I kept my tension tight throughout all of that. My hands are sore. And the last double crochet is still green. I don't really want to frog it, but I'll frog this last repeat here. I mean, this just seems ridiculous. I shouldn't have to go to like what is for me really extremely tight tension just to get this to work out. So at the end here, it just says fasten off. There's no leave like a 10 centimeter, 4-inch, whatever yarn tail. It says when motif is complete, cut yarn where color 5, the longest color, ends, leaving a yarn tail for weaving in. Well, that presents a problem because if I cut this where this color ends, I'm cutting it right here. That doesn't leave me a tail for weaving in. That's just gonna unravel. Honestly, I don't know what to do in this situation because I crochet. I'm not gonna frog this round because I crocheted that round tightly. My hands are sore. I crocheted that tightly. And then you saw me frog this section and I crocheted that like super ridiculously tightly. And that just got me to the end. If I cut that there, there's nothing to weave in. But if I cut it longer, I'm potentially ruining the subsequent squares because there might not be enough green to start me off in round 2. I'm just going to cut. I'm just going to cut a tail. Where did I put my scissors? I was literally using them before I started this. I'm just going to cut that. So it's like long enough to weave in, but hopefully it's not too long that it eats into the green yarn for round 1. So yeah, if I'd cut it where it was supposed to be cut, that's where I would have cut it, right there. And that is how much yarn I would have had left to weave in. My hands are a bit sore. I'm not going to be doing the full second square right now, but I do want to see if I can get round 1 to work, because I'm going to do the same thing that I did when I started off this one, or started it for the second time. I'm going to leave 8 centimeters. And with this one, with this square, especially for round 1, I'm going to make a conscious effort to crochet it really tightly. I think I did that. Oh my god. Yeah, so I had enough green left. You know what? I think I'm done for now. My hands have been pretty sore anyway. It's just the change in the weather here. So I think the best thing for my hands and probably my sanity as well is just to step away from this for a while. I will be chipping away at this. I do want to know if you can actually make 14 squares as the yarn label suggests. But yeah, my hands are sore and I'm getting frustrated to the point where it's going to have a negative impact on my project. So I need to step away and then I'm going to come back to this later. All right, well, it's been a day or two. I'm on square 2 and it took me 5 attempts to get round 1 correct. This is genuinely such a frustrating experience. Like, to be honest, going into this, I kind of expected it to be just because of how like this yarn works. But this is really more trouble than it's worth, if I'm being honest. But despite that, I am going to power through. I want to crochet all these squares, hoping I get the 14 that I was promised. But there's just so much back and forth. I'll save my full tirade to the end of the video, but who knows, maybe my mind will be changed. But Like, I don't think so. I see no way for this situation to improve. It's not like the yarn can change. Coming back to this, my tension is obviously going to be a little bit different today than it was when I crocheted the first square. And just that tiny little alteration just completely threw off the round. You got to crochet and frog and fine tune your tension as you go. I'm going to spend probably the next week or so here just crocheting these bloody squares on and off, taking long breaks when I get frustrated. Let me tell you, when I first saw this yarn, it must have popped off, I don't know, about a year or so ago now. But my first reaction to that was, you know, that's a genuinely good idea. I liked the concept of having an like all-in-one inclusive yarn that produces granny squares. And in theory, I still think this is a cool concept. It works in theory. It does not work so well in practice, in my opinion. This yarn, I can say confidently, now that I've crocheted with it, is gimmicky, it's finicky, and honestly, a waste of time. The amount of frustration that I went through trying to get these bloody rounds to line up was almost enough to put me off granny squares entirely. I followed the instructions. It said leave a 4-inch or 10cm yarn tail to start with. I did that. Did that work out for me? Nope, I had to leave about an 8cm-ish tail to begin, but then that just changed throughout this process as I continued making squares. Sometimes I'd have to leave a huge, long 12cm tail. Other times I found myself needing a shorter, like 6 or 5cm tail, which makes no sense in the context of this yarn. If you do not get your tension on point, if it is too tight, if it is too loose, you will have to frog some, if not all, of the stitches in your round and re-crochet them, which I had to do, honestly, about 95% of the time. I can only think off the top of my head of maybe 3 occasions where I actually hit that sweet spot of my tension and managed to finish around without having to frog at all. Disappointingly frustrating experience. I got so annoyed at points during this that I just had to stop and walk away. These squares have taken me about 2 weeks to complete. Yes, some of that was due to, you know, me managing my pain, but a lot of that was due to just sheer annoyance. I had to put it down. Otherwise, I was just going to rage quit anyway. It's honestly so disappointing. I was looking forward to crocheting with this yarn, especially because I have several upcoming projects for which I'm using granny squares, and I thought this could be a good solution, but it really wasn't, in my opinion. Let's break this down a little bit. These first 4 squares, the ones with the blue stitch markers in them, these are squares that I crocheted exactly as the instructions stated to. And even though I was following the instructions, I still had a lot of trouble with them. All the things I've mentioned previously, you know, tension has to be consistent. I was frogging constantly. I had to leave various lengths for my beginning yarn tail. So because they weren't really working out, I thought I'd do a little bit of experimentation. And that is what these squares with the green stitch markers are. So with these ones, I did a variety of different things. I started off with a magic circle rather than the chain method. What else did I do? I tried doing no chains in between my non-increase clusters because you're supposed to do, according to the pattern, 1 chain between each cluster. I just omitted that chain to see if that made any difference. Not really, as far as I could tell. What else did I do? That's it. I started off the pattern with a chain 3, which is how I would normally crochet my granny squares rather than the chain 6 that the pattern called for. And all that experimenting really didn't make much of a difference to my overall experience. I was still having to stop frog, adjust my tension, and all that sort of stuff. The same issues I was having with the previous squares. So branching out, trying to do my own thing did not help in that regard. And after this point, that's where I sort of hit the whatever stage and stopped caring a little bit. I don't like saying that because I want to give 100% to my projects, and that's hard to do when you're just not invested in them. But that was my genuine reaction. That's how I felt. So for the remaining squares, I just basically did whatever. I stopped caring about the actual pattern so much, and by that what I mostly mean is for each round, according to the instructions, you're supposed to finish on 2 double crochet, and then the first 3 chains of the original chain 6 you used to start the round becomes like the 3rd double crochet of that cluster. To make my rounds work out and just to stop frogging like every 5 minutes, I changed that up. Sometimes I would stop on 3 double crochet if I had too much yarn. Sometimes I would stop at 1 double crochet if I was running out of yarn. I just tweaked the pattern a little bit like that with these squares just to stop the frogging. There was so much bloody frogging. Another thing I sort of stopped caring about so much is how my rounds started off. You can see in some of the squares I have the previous round's color at the beginning of the next round. I sort of went, whatever, it is what it is. It was just, I got so irritated with this yarn, and I'm bummed out about that because, like I mentioned before, I really liked the idea. I thought it might be a time saver. You don't have to worry about dealing with multiple skeins. You can just whip yourself up some granny squares nice and quick using that one skein, but no, it didn't work out like that. Disappointment, that's how I can sum up this experience. Frustration and disappointment. And I still have an entire full skein left to crochet. I will use that up because I don't want to waste it, and I do have a project in mind for the purpley granny squares, but I'm never going to purchase this yarn again. So if you're interested in my opinion, my advice is don't waste your money on this yarn. It is more frustration than it is worth. I genuinely think you are better off buying separate colored skeins and just using those to crochet your multicolored granny squares. And also, depending on which yarn you purchase, it may actually work out cheaper to buy individual yarns than one skein of this Red Heart granny square yarn. That is my opinion, but I do hate saying that. I shouldn't feel like I'm being mean to a huge corporation like Spotlight or Red Heart, but I really wanted this to work out, and I'm disappointed that it didn't. But what I won't be disappointed in is... And today's featured creator on the hookup is Holly, and she says, I've been crocheting since I was 5, the 80s, and eventually picked up knitting around 2010. I'm glad I did because for a very long time my wrist could not handle crochet but could tolerate knitting. Eventually I stumbled on Alt Knots and heard about her favourite crochet hook for wrist pain, and I'm finally back in the game. And I recently took the inspiration to start my channel. That's really exciting, and if you see this, can you just pop down the brand of the hook that you found that helps with wrist pain? Not only would I like to look into it personally, but I'm sure there's other people who are in the same situation as well, so we can check that out. All of Holly's links will be down in the description, so go subscribe to her YouTube channel and check out her other social medias as well. If you would like to apply for the hookup for yourself, there is also a link down to a Google form in the description, so you can just head on there and fill that out. It's a bit of a downer note to end this one on. I was so excited when I saw this yarn in Spotlight. I was like, yes, I can finally try it. And then I tried it, and I wasn't so excited anymore. Despite the frustration, the disappointment, it was a learning experience. Let's try and take some positives from it. And that reminds me, one positive I can take away from this is that the label said I should get 14 squares from the yarn. I actually got 15. So woohoo, I got to crochet an additional pain in the ass granny square. Well, speaking of things that I forgot to mention, I'll just slide this in at the end of the video. Another thing that really annoyed me about this yarn was the dye bleed. It's horrible. I thought when I first started using it, I don't know how well this is going to show up on the camera. You might not be able to see that all that well, but I saw a couple of spots and I was like, yeah, whatever. But then as I kept crocheting with it, the white yarn is the most affected. It's just covered in splotches of blue, and there's a lot of splotches, and it's made the white sort of an off-white color. It's not a bright clear white. It's definitely got a grayish blue undertone to it now, just because of the dye bleed. It's everywhere, and that certainly detracts from like the aesthetic of the squares. Especially if you want that crisp, clean white, you're certainly not going to get that with this yarn. But that's another reason why I think that you're better off getting individual colors, because you're not going to have blue dye. Well, hopefully you're not going to have blue dye bleeding into your white if you just get a separate white skein. Well, that really was a bit of a downer to end on, wasn't it? So let me know your thoughts. Have you crocheted with this Red Heart Granny Square yarn? If so, what was your experience? Did you find it as like finicky as I did, or did you have less trouble? I'm always interested to hear other people's experiences, but for me, this is going to be a two and done kind of thing. Future granny squares will not be crocheted with Red Heart yarn. So thank you all for watching. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Share it if you think it's worth sharing. And I will see you in the next one.